I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of my phone alarm and immediately knew something was wrong because I hadn't set any alarm. Then I realized it wasn't an alarm at all, but my neighbor Jim banging on my door like the house was on fire. I stumbled out of bed, threw on a robe, and rushed downstairs expecting some kind of emergency. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. "Pete, you need to see this right now," Jim said, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing February air. He was standing on my front porch in his pajamas and boots, looking absolutely furious. I followed him outside, the cold hitting me like a physical wall. That's when I saw it. A massive pile of snow, easily 12 feet tall and probably 30 feet wide, completely blocking my driveway. Not just blocking it, absolutely obliterating any possibility of getting in or out. My truck was parked in the garage, trapped behind what looked like a miniature mountain range. "What the hell happened?" I asked, my brain still trying to process the scene in front of me. "The HOA snowplow came through about an hour ago," Jim explained. "But instead of just plowing the street like normal, they deliberately pushed all the snow from the entire cul-de-sac right in front of your driveway. I watched them do it. The driver got out, looked at your house, checked some kind of clipboard, then got back in and just kept dumping snow right here." I stared at the pile, feeling my blood pressure rising despite the cold. This wasn't an accident, this was deliberate, and I had a pretty good idea why. 3 weeks earlier, I'd gotten into it with Patricia Denton, the president of our neighborhood HOA in Maple Ridge, Minnesota. She'd sent me a violation notice because my garage door had a small dent in it from where I'd accidentally backed into it with my truck. The dent was maybe 6 inches wide and barely noticeable unless you were specifically looking for it. But Patricia had made it her personal mission to cite me for every tiny imperfection she could find. I'd responded to her notice by telling her I'd fix it when I had time, probably in the spring when the weather was better. Apparently, that wasn't good enough. She'd shown up at my house personally, standing on my doorstep with her clipboard and her perpetually pinched expression, demanding I fix it immediately or face daily fines of $50. We'd had words, strong words. I may have suggested that she find a more productive hobby than harassing people about minor cosmetic issues. She may have threatened to make my life difficult. I thought she was just blowing hot air. Now, staring at the mountain of snow blocking my driveway, I realized she'd been dead serious. "I have to be at the hospital in 4 hours, I said to Jim. I was a surgical technician at Minneapolis General, and I had a full day of procedures scheduled. Missing work wasn't an option. "Call the Township," Jim suggested. "They can send someone out to clear it." I pulled out my phone and dialed the Township office, knowing it was pointless at 3 in the morning. Sure enough, I got the after-hours voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation, then called the emergency line. The dispatcher told me that snow removal wasn't considered an emergency and that I'd need to wait until regular business hours at 8 a.m. to file a complaint. 8 a.m. doesn't help me, I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I need to get to work." "I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing I can do." "You could hire a private snow removal service." I hung up and immediately started calling snow removal companies. The first 3 didn't answer. The 4th told me they were booked solid for the next week. The 5th said they could maybe get someone out by noon, which was useless. Jim stood beside me, watching as I grew increasingly frustrated. "What about calling your buddy Mike? Doesn't he have that construction company?" "Mike Anderson." "Of course. I'd gone to high school with Mike, and he now ran a successful excavation and construction business just outside of town. More importantly, he owned several pieces of heavy equipment, including a bulldozer." I pulled up his number and hesitated for just a moment. It was 3 in the morning. But then I looked at the snow pile again, thinking about Patricia Denton's smug face, and hit the call button. Mike answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "This better be life or death, Pete. Not life or death, but close. Someone dumped about 40 tons of snow in front of my driveway, and I need to get to work in 4 hours. Any chance you can bring the dozer over?" There was a long pause, then Mike laughed. "Are you serious right now? Dead serious. The HOA president is on some kind of vendetta and she had the snowplow deliberately block my driveway. I'm completely trapped." "The HOA did this. Patricia Denton." "That's my guess, yeah." Another pause. "You know what? I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to that woman. She cited my mother 3 times last year for having her trash cans visible from the street. Give me 30 minutes. He hung up before I could even thank him. Jim looked at me with wide eyes. "He's actually coming." "Apparently so. This is either going to be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever." "Probably both," I admitted. Jim went back to his house to get dressed and make coffee, promising to return with updates and moral support. I went inside to shower and get ready for work, checking the clock every few minutes. At 3:30, I heard the distinctive rumble of a diesel engine and the metallic clanking of tracks on pavement. I rushed outside to see Mike pulling up in his Caterpillar D6 bulldozer, the machine absolutely dwarfing my suburban street. The dozer was bright yellow and covered in mud and construction site grime, looking completely out of place among the neat rows of identical houses. Several lights had turned on in nearby homes, curious neighbors peeking out their windows at the commotion. Mike climbed down from the cab, wearing a thick jacket and a grin that suggested he was enjoying this way too much. He was a big guy, over 6 feet tall with a beard that he'd been growing since college, and he looked like exactly the kind of person you'd want on your side in a fight with the HOA. "All right, show me this snow pile," he said. I led him to my driveway, where the massive pile sat like a monument to petty bureaucratic revenge. Mike let out a low whistle. "Yeah, someone definitely did this on purpose. See how it's all compacted and pushed right up against your garage door? They made multiple passes to get it this tight." "Can you move it?" "Can I move it?" "Pete, I can move a hillside. This is just frozen water." He walked around the pile, examining it from different angles. "Here's what I'm thinking. I'll push it all across the street into that empty lot. The Hendersons moved out last month, right?" "Yeah, the house is for sale." "Perfect. I'll pile it over there nice and neat. Give me about 20 minutes. Mike climbed back into the dozer, and I stood back as he fired up the engine properly. The machine roared to life with a sound that probably woke up everyone within 3 blocks. Jim came jogging over with 2 travel mugs of coffee, handing me one as we watched Mike position the bulldozer. The blade lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and then Mike drove forward. The dozer hit the snow pile with unstoppable force, the blade cutting through the compacted snow like it was made of foam. Huge chunks of white fell away as Mike expertly worked the machine, pushing the snow back, and then pivoting to angle it across the street. More lights were coming on now. I saw faces in windows, some confused, some entertained. A few neighbors actually came outside to watch, standing in their driveways with coats thrown over their pajamas. Mike worked methodically, pushing load after load of snow across the street and into the empty lot next to the Henderson place. The pile he was creating grew larger and larger, but at least it wasn't blocking my driveway anymore. After about 15 minutes, I could see my garage door again. After 20, my driveway was completely clear, better than it had been in weeks. Mike backed the dozer up and shut it down, climbing out with a satisfied expression. "That should do it," he said, accepting the coffee Jim offered him. You're going to want to document this, by the way. Take pictures, write down everything that happened, keep a timeline. If the HOA tries to fine you for this or claim you damaged property, you'll want evidence. I was already pulling out my phone, snapping photos of my now clear driveway, the massive pile across the street, and the bulldozer sitting in the middle of the cul-de-sac. Thanks, Mike. I owe you big time. You owe me breakfast and the full story of why Patricia Denton hates you so much, he said. But seriously, this is pretty extreme even for her. You might want to consider filing a complaint with the township or even calling a lawyer. Before I could respond, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A white sedan with official-looking plates pulled into the cul-de-sac and stopped right in front of us. My heart sank as Patricia Denton herself stepped out of the car, her face already twisted into an expression of righteous fury. She was exactly what you'd picture when someone said, HOA president, mid-50s, severely styled blonde hair, expensive athleisure, where despite the fact that I'd never seen her exercise, and an oversized designer purse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She looked like she'd been up for hours, her makeup perfect and her outfit coordinated, which made me wonder if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, gesturing at the bulldozer. Do you have any idea what time it is? You're violating at least 6 different neighborhood ordinances right now. Good morning to you too, Patricia, I said, keeping my voice calm despite the anger building in my chest. I'm just clearing the snow that someone mysteriously dumped in my driveway. That snow was placed there by the authorized HOA snowplow service as part of routine winter maintenance, she said, pulling out her ever-present clipboard. You had no right to move it without approval. Routine maintenance, Jim spoke up. I watched your plow driver deliberately dump the entire street's worth of snow right in front of Pete's garage. That's not maintenance, that's harassment. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked at Jim. I suggest you stay out of this unless you want to find yourself on the receiving end of a violation notice. Go ahead, Jim shot back. I've got my Ring doorbell footage of your plow driver. I'm sure the township would love to see it. I could see Patricia's jaw clench. She turned her attention back to me, her pen poised over her clipboard. You have operated heavy machinery in a residential zone without proper permits. You have created a disturbance during quiet hours. You have placed snow on property that doesn't belong to you. She nodded toward the pile in the Hendersons' lot. Each of these violations carries a fine of $500, payable within 30 days. You can't be serious, I said. I am completely serious. Furthermore, I'm issuing an emergency injunction requiring you to remove all that snow from the Henderson property by noon today, or face additional daily fines of $200. Mike stepped forward, his considerable size making Patricia take an involuntary step backward. Madam, I'm the one who operated the equipment and I have all the proper licenses and insurance. If you want to issue a fine, it should be to me, not Pete. And you are Mike Anderson, Anderson Excavation and Construction. Here's my card. He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. You'll see that I'm fully licensed and bonded to operate heavy equipment anywhere in the state of Minnesota. As for disturbing the peace, I was responding to an emergency situation where a citizen's property access was being illegally blocked. Patricia studied the card, and I could see her calculating her next move. The HOA has the authority to manage snow removal as it sees fit within the community. The HOA has the authority to manage snow removal on common areas, Mike corrected her. You don't have the authority to deliberately block someone's driveway. That's property interference and it's actually illegal. I'll be reporting this to the HOA board, Patricia said, her voice rising. "We'll be filing a lawsuit against you, Mr. Ashford, for violation of the covenants and conditions. You signed those documents when you purchased your home, and they're legally binding. And I'll be filing a complaint with the Township about the HOA's snow removal practices," I responded. "I've got witnesses, photographic evidence, and now Ring doorbell footage showing that this was deliberate harassment." We stood there in a tense standoff, the sky slowly starting to lighten with the approaching dawn. More neighbors had come outside now, watching the confrontation with obvious interest. I recognized Tom and Susan from 3 houses down, the Patel family from across the street, and old Mr. Garrison from the corner house. "Is there a problem here?" Tom called out. "We heard all the noise." "The HOA blocked Pete's driveway with snow," Jim explained loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He had to call in a bulldozer to get out." "They did the same thing to us last month," Susan added. "Not as bad as this, but they definitely pushed extra snow into our driveway on purpose." "And they cited me for having icicles on my gutters," Mrs. Patel said. "Icicles? As if I can control the weather." Patricia's face was getting redder with each comment. "If all of you have complaints, you can file them through the proper channels. Right now, I'm dealing with a clear violation of community standards. The only violation I see is the HOA abusing its authority," Mr. Garrison said. He was a retired lawyer, and I'd never been so happy to see him taking an interest in neighborhood drama. "Patricia, I've been reviewing the HOA bylaws lately, and I don't think you have the authority to issue fines without a board vote. Have you consulted with the other board members about this?" Patricia's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "This is within my authority as president to handle in emergency situations. I don't think a garage door dent constitutes an emergency," Mr. Garrison continued. "And I definitely don't think revenge snow dumping is covered under any section of our bylaws. In fact, I think you might be opening the HOA up to some serious liability here." "I don't need legal advice from a senile old man," Patricia snapped, and immediately I could see she regretted it. Mr. Garrison's expression hardened. "I retired from practicing law 3 years ago. I'm not senile, and I'm not going to stand here and watch you bully my neighbors. Pete, give me a call later today. I'd be happy to review your options with you, free of charge." "Thank you, Mr. Garrison," I said, genuinely grateful. Patricia seemed to realize she was losing control of the situation. She scribbled something furiously on her clipboard, tore off a sheet, and thrust it at me. "This is your official violation notice. You have 15 days to appeal to the board. Until then, the fines stand." She looked at Mike. "And you should know that your company will never work in this neighborhood again. I'll make sure of it." "My company works all over the state," Mike said mildly. "I'm not too worried about one HOA's opinion." Patricia stalked back to her car and drove off with more speed than was probably safe for a residential street. As soon as she was gone, the tension broke, and several neighbors actually started laughing. "I've been waiting years for someone to stand up to her," Tom said, walking over to shake my hand. "She's made everyone in this neighborhood miserable with her power trips. The woman cited me because my kid left a bicycle on the front lawn overnight," Jim added. "A bicycle. Not even on the street, on my own lawn." We spent the next 20 minutes standing in the street, sharing Patricia Denton horror stories as the sun started to rise. It turned out that almost everyone in the neighborhood had their own tale of HOA overreach. Fines for Christmas decorations being up too early or taken down too late. Citations for paint colors that were allegedly not on the approved list, even though they clearly were. demands to remove perfectly healthy trees because they blocked the view of the neighborhood entrance sign. By the time we broke up, there was a general consensus that something needed to be done about Patricia and the HOA board. Mr. Garrison suggested calling a special meeting of all homeowners to discuss the issues and potentially vote on new leadership. Mike left around 5:30, refusing to accept payment for his help. Watching Patricia Denton's face was payment enough, he said as he climbed back into the dozer. But seriously, call me if you need anything else. And get a lawyer, Pete. This isn't over. I went inside to finish getting ready for work, my mind racing with everything that had happened. I checked the violation notice Patricia had given me and felt my blood pressure spike again. She'd listed fines totaling $2,000 for various supposed violations, with threats of more to come. At the hospital, I found it hard to concentrate on my work. I kept thinking about the snow pile, Patricia's threats, and the legal maze I was probably about to enter. During my lunch break, I called Mr. Garrison, who answered immediately. "I've been doing some research," he said without preamble. "Patricia Denton has been issuing fines and violations without proper board authority for at least 2 years. I've pulled the meeting minutes, and there's no record of votes authorizing most of her actions." "Can she do that?" I asked. "No, she can't. The HOA bylaws clearly state that the president can only act on behalf of the board in emergency situations, and even then, the actions must be ratified at the next board meeting. I can't find any record of that happening. She's essentially been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom." "What can I do about it?" "Several things. First, you can refuse to pay the fines and demand a hearing with the full board. Second, you can file a complaint with the township about the snow dumping incident. Third, and this is what I'd recommend, you can gather the other homeowners and call for a special election to replace the board." "How do I do that?" "According to the bylaws, any 15 homeowners can petition for a special meeting. At that meeting, you can vote on anything you want, including removing board members. I've already spoken with about 10 neighbors who are willing to sign a petition." I felt a surge of hope. "How soon can we do this?" "Give me a week to organize it properly. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction with Patricia, every fine notice, every incident. We're going to need evidence to present to the other homeowners." I spent the rest of my lunch break feeling slightly better. At least I had a plan now and allies. When I got home that evening, I found a new notice taped to my front door. This one was from the township, informing me that I was required to remove the snow pile from the Henderson property within 72 hours or face municipal fines. I called the township office immediately. "This is Pete Ashford on Clearwater Drive. I just received a notice about snow removal." "Yes, Mr. Ashford. We received a complaint that you illegally dumped snow on private property. I had to move the snow because the HOA deliberately blocked my driveway. I have witnesses and video evidence." There was a pause. "Can you send us that evidence?" "Absolutely. Who do I send it to?" The clerk gave me an email address, and I spent the next hour compiling everything I had. Photos of the blocked driveway, Jim's Ring doorbell footage showing the plow driver deliberately piling snow in front of my garage, pictures of the cleared driveway, and shots of the snow pile in the empty lot. I wrote a detailed explanation of what had happened and sent it all off. The next morning, I got a call from a township supervisor named Gary Miller. "Mr. Ashford, I've reviewed the evidence you sent. I have to say, this is pretty egregious. The HOA snowplow driver clearly violated several regulations, and the HOA president's behavior appears to constitute harassment. So, what happens now? We're going to investigate. I'll need to interview witnesses and review the HOA's snow removal contract. In the meantime, I'm putting a hold on any fines against you. As for the snow pile, we're going to require the HOA to move it, since they're the ones who created the problem in the first place. Thank you. That's a huge relief. One more thing. This isn't the first complaint we've received about Patricia Denton and the Maple Ridge HOA. We've had several reports of overreach and harassment. We're going to be taking a closer look at the whole organization. That afternoon, Mr. Garrison called with more good news. He'd collected signatures from 18 homeowners for the special meeting petition. We set a date for 2 weeks out, giving everyone time to prepare and spread the word. Patricia, of course, didn't take this well. Over the next week, I received 3 more violation notices. One was for the snow pile that the Township had already ordered the HOA to move. One was for unauthorized vehicles on my property, referring to Mike's bulldozer even though it had only been there for about 30 minutes. The third was for creating a public disturbance, again related to the bulldozer incident. I ignored all of them on Mr. Garrison's advice and focused on documenting everything. Jim sent me his ring footage. Other neighbors came forward with their own stories and evidence of HOA abuse. Mrs. Patel had kept every single citation she'd received over the past 3 years, totaling over 40 separate violations. Tom had correspondence showing that Patricia had threatened to put a lien on his house over unpaid fines that were never properly assessed. The special meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening at the community center. Mr. Garrison had reserved the space and sent official notice to all 127 homeowners in Maple Ridge. The notice clearly stated the meeting's purpose: to review HOA management practices and potentially vote on new leadership. Patricia tried to cancel the meeting, claiming it hadn't been properly authorized. Mr. Garrison sent her a detailed letter citing the specific bylaw sections that gave homeowners the right to call such meetings, and pointing out that all proper procedures had been followed. She then tried to claim the community center wasn't available, but Mr. Garrison had the rental contract and receipt. The day of the meeting, I was a nervous wreck. I'd never been involved in neighborhood politics before, and I had no idea what to expect. Mr. Garrison had asked me to prepare a brief statement about the snow dumping incident and my interactions with Patricia. I'd written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to sound reasonable and factual rather than angry and vindictive. Jim picked me up at 6:30 and we drove to the community center together. I was shocked to see the parking lot already nearly full. Inside, the main hall was set up with rows of folding chairs, almost all of them occupied. I estimated at least 80 people were already there, with more filing in behind us. Mr. Garrison was at the front, setting up a laptop and projector. He waved us over. "This is a much better turnout than I expected," he said, looking pleased. "Word really spread. I think a lot of people have been waiting for an opportunity like this." Patricia arrived at exactly 7 o'clock with 2 other people I recognized as fellow board members: Richard Thompson, the treasurer, and Nancy Miller, the secretary. They looked uncomfortable, whispering to each other as they took seats in the front row. Mr. Garrison called the meeting to order at 7:15. He started by explaining the purpose of the gathering and the relevant bylaws that gave homeowners the right to call such meetings. Patricia tried to interrupt several times, but Mr. Garrison politely but firmly cut her off, pointing out that proper parliamentary procedure was being followed. Then he opened the floor for comments. The response was overwhelming. One after another, homeowners stood up to share their experiences with the HOA. The Patel family described how they'd been cited for everything from decorative garden stones to a door wreath that was allegedly the wrong color. Tom talked about the threats to lien his property. Susan described how she'd been fined for having her garbage cans visible for more than 30 minutes after collection time. A woman I didn't know well, Carol Vaughn, stood up and tearfully described how Patricia had cited her elderly mother for not mowing the lawn frequently enough, while the mother was literally in the hospital recovering from a stroke. The fine had accumulated to over $3,000 before Carol had been able to get it sorted out. Another homeowner, a young couple named the Johnsons, explained how they'd received a violation notice because their front door color wasn't on the approved list, even though the door had been that color when they bought the house 2 years earlier and had supposedly been approved by the previous owners. The stories went on for over an hour. Mr. Garrison kept careful notes and someone was recording the whole meeting on video. Patricia's face got progressively redder, and I could see her scribbling furiously on her clipboard. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the front of the room, feeling all those eyes on me, and pulled out my prepared statement. 3 weeks ago, I received a violation notice about a small dent in my garage door, I began. I told Patricia I would fix it in the spring. She didn't accept that answer and showed up at my house to threaten me with daily fines. We had an argument, and she told me she would make my life difficult. I clicked to the first photo on the projector, my driveway at 3 a.m., completely blocked by snow. This is what I woke up to last week. The HOA snowplow had deliberately dumped snow from the entire street in front of my driveway. I had to be at work in a few hours, and I couldn't get my car out. The township couldn't help until business hours. Snow removal companies were booked up. I showed the next photos. The bulldozer, Mike clearing the snow, the final result. I called a friend who owns a construction company. He brought his bulldozer and moved the snow at 3 in the morning. Patricia showed up while we were working and threatened to fine me $2,000 for various supposed violations. I showed Jim's Ring doorbell footage on the projector. You could clearly see the snowplow making multiple deliberate passes to pile snow directly in front of my garage door. There was audible anger in the room as people watched. The township reviewed this footage and determined that the HOA driver violated multiple regulations. They've opened an investigation into HOA practices. Meanwhile, Patricia has continued to issue violation notices against me for everything related to this incident, including fines for the snow pile that she created in the first place. I returned to my seat amid applause and supportive comments. Patricia stood up immediately, her face flushed with anger. "This is a witch hunt," she declared. "Everything I've done has been in service of maintaining property values and community standards. If some of you are upset about being held accountable for violating the rules you agreed to, that's not my problem. Patricia, you don't have the authority to issue most of these fines," Mr. Garrison said calmly. "I've reviewed 2 years of board meeting minutes. There's no record of votes authorizing your actions. I don't need board approval for every minor administrative decision," Patricia shot back. "Actually, according to the bylaws, you do. The president can only act independently in genuine emergencies, and those actions must be ratified at the next board meeting. That hasn't been happening." Richard Thompson, the treasurer, stood up. He looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Patricia, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I've noticed some irregularities in the financial records." Everyone turned to look at him. Patricia's expression shifted to alarm. "What irregularities?" Mr. Garrison asked. Richard pulled out a folder. "The HOA has collected approximately $87,000 in fines over the past 2 years. According to the bylaws, fine money is supposed to go into the Community Improvement Fund. But when I tried to review that account last month, Patricia told me the bank had made an error and she was sorting it out. There was an error, Patricia said quickly. It's being resolved. I called the bank myself, Richard continued. They said there was no error. They also told me that the Community Improvement Fund has a current balance of about $300. Where did the rest of the money go? The room erupted in shocked conversation. Mr. Garrison had to bang his hand on the table to restore order. Patricia, these are serious allegations, he said. Do you have documentation showing where the fine money went? This is an ambush, Patricia said, her voice shaking. You're all ganging up on me because I tried to maintain standards. Richard, you're the treasurer. It's your job to track the finances. I tried, Richard said. You wouldn't give me access to the accounts. You said you were handling it. I think we need to see those financial records, Mr. Garrison said. Patricia, can you provide them? Not without proper authorization from the board, Patricia said. This isn't even a legitimate board meeting. Actually, according to the bylaws, any meeting called by 15 or more homeowners and properly noticed is legitimate, Mr. Garrison corrected. And we have the authority to review all HOA records, including finances. I'm making a formal motion that Patricia Denton immediately provide all financial records for review. I second that motion, Tom called out. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Patricia and Nancy Miller voted against it. I need time to compile everything, Patricia said. I can have it ready next week. That's acceptable, Mr. Garrison agreed. Now I'd like to make another motion, that the homeowners vote on whether to recall the current HOA board and hold elections for new officers. This sparked intense discussion. Nancy Miller argued that the current board had been properly elected and should serve out their terms. Several homeowners pointed out that if there was financial mismanagement, waiting wasn't an option. Others worried about the logistics of running the HOA without a board in place. Mr. Garrison proposed a compromise. Conduct an immediate confidence vote. If more than 50% of homeowners present voted no confidence, the board would be suspended pending an investigation and election. A temporary oversight committee would manage essential HOA functions in the interim. The vote took place by paper ballot to ensure accuracy. Mr. Garrison, along with 2 volunteer homeowners who weren't on the board, counted the ballots while we waited. The result was decisive. 73 votes of no confidence, 12 votes of confidence, and 3 abstentions. Patricia looked stunned. This is illegal. You can't just remove an elected board. Actually, we can, Mr. Garrison said. It's in Section 12 of the bylaws. In cases of malfeasance or loss of homeowner confidence, the board can be suspended by a 2/3 vote of homeowners. We have well over 2/3. He turned to address the room. I'm accepting nominations for a 5-person oversight committee to manage the HOA until we can hold proper elections. The process took another hour, but eventually we had a committee. Mr. Garrison, Tom, Susan, Richard Thompson, who had clearly been kept in the dark about Patricia's activities, and Mrs. Patel. Their first action was to request that Patricia turn over all HOA files, accounts, and records immediately. I'll need a few days, Patricia protested. You have until Friday at 5 p.m., Mr. Garrison said. If you don't comply, we'll consider legal action. The meeting broke up around 10 p.m. People lingered, talking in clusters, clearly energized by what had happened. Jim and I stood outside in the cold, watching Patricia storm to her car. That was intense, Jim said. Yeah, but I'm glad it happened. She can't keep abusing her position. Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed with conversation about the meeting. Patricia was noticeably absent from her usual patrols around the community. I didn't see her car driving around checking for violations, and the HOA email list was silent for the first time in months. Friday afternoon, Mr. Garrison called me. Patricia finally turned over the records. "Pete, this is worse than we thought." "How bad?" "She's embezzled at least $60,000. The fine money went into the community improvement fund like it was supposed to, but then she transferred most of it to a personal account. She tried to hide it by manipulating the records, but Richard found the bank statements. We're calling an emergency committee meeting tonight, and I think we need to involve the police." I felt my stomach drop. I'd expected mismanagement, maybe some questionable decisions, but not outright theft. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Completely sure. Richard's been an accountant for 30 years. He knows what he's looking at. We've got bank records showing transfers from the HOA account to an account in Patricia's name. She even forged Richard's signature on some of the transfer authorizations." That evening, I attended the committee meeting at Mr. Garrison's house. Richard had printed out spreadsheets and bank statements, laying them all out on the dining room table. The evidence was damning. Patricia had been systematically siphoning money from the HOA for at least 18 months, maybe longer. "What did she spend it on?" Susan asked. According to her personal bank records, which Richard was able to access through the bank since he's a co-signer on the HOA accounts, luxury purchases. A new car, expensive vacations, designer clothes. She was basically funding her lifestyle with HOA money. "We have to report this, Mrs. Patel said. "This is fraud." Everyone agreed. Mr. Garrison called the Maple Ridge Police Department and explained the situation. A detective named Sarah Rodriguez arrived within an hour. She was in her mid-30s, professional and thorough, and she spent 2 hours reviewing the evidence Richard had compiled. "This is definitely criminal," she said finally. "I'm going to need to take all of these documents as evidence. We'll open an investigation and likely seek an arrest warrant." "How much total are we talking about?" "We can document at least $63,000, Richard said. "But there may be more. Some of the earlier records are incomplete, and I suspect she might have been destroying evidence." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "I'll need statements from all of you. And we'll probably need to interview other homeowners who can testify about the fines and Patricia's behavior. Mr. Ashford, I understand you have video evidence of the snow dumping incident." "Yes, my neighbor's Ring doorbell captured it." "I'll need that too. Can you email it to me?" I spent the next hour providing my statement and sending over all the evidence I'd collected. Detective Rodriguez was particularly interested in the violation notices Patricia had sent me, especially the ones after the special meeting. "These could constitute witness intimidation," she said. "If she was trying to punish you for speaking up, that's another charge." The investigation moved quickly after that. Detective Rodriguez interviewed dozens of homeowners, collected bank records, and reviewed years of HOA documents. 3 weeks after the special meeting, I got a call from Mr. Garrison. "They arrested Patricia this morning," he said. "Multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. She's being held on a $100,000 bail." I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that she couldn't continue her behavior, but also a strange sadness that it had come to this. Patricia had been a member of our community, someone's neighbor and friend, and she'd thrown it all away for money and power. The arrest made the local news. "HOA president arrested for embezzlement." Read the headline in the Maple Ridge Observer. The story detailed the charges and included comments from several homeowners about Patricia's behavior. My snow dumping incident was mentioned as an example of how her harassment had finally prompted homeowners to investigate. Nancy Miller, the former secretary, resigned from the Oversight Committee, saying she'd had no knowledge of Patricia's financial crimes but felt she should have been more diligent. The committee accepted her resignation and appointed Jim as her replacement. The Township investigation into the snow dumping incident concluded around the same time. They found that Patricia had explicitly instructed the plow driver to block my driveway, showing him photos of my house and the garage door dent. The driver had been uncomfortable with the request, but had complied because Patricia was his employer through the HOA contract. The Township fined the plowing company and terminated their contract with the HOA. The driver, who cooperated fully with the investigation, wasn't charged but lost his job. Meanwhile, the Oversight Committee set about trying to repair the damage Patricia had done. They reviewed every violation notice issued over the past 2 years, dismissing the vast majority as either illegitimate or improperly assessed. The few that remained were valid issues that homeowners had already addressed. My various fines were all dismissed. So were Carol Vaughn's charges against her mother, the Johnsons' front door citation, and virtually every other complaint that had been mentioned at the special meeting. The committee also established new procedures for HOA management. No single person would have unilateral authority to issue fines or take actions. All significant decisions would require committee votes. Financial records would be reviewed monthly by at least 2 committee members. And homeowners would have a clear, accessible appeal process for any violations. Elections were held in April. I didn't run for any position, having had more than enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. But many of the Oversight Committee members did run, and most were elected. Tom became the new president, with Susan as vice president. Richard remained as treasurer, and Mrs. Patel became secretary. The 5th board position went to a younger homeowner named David Preston, who had impressed everyone with his level-headed approach during the transition. Patricia's criminal case moved through the courts over the following months. Her lawyer tried to argue that the money had been used for legitimate HOA expenses, but Richard's meticulous accounting showed otherwise. In August, faced with overwhelming evidence, Patricia pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay the full $63,000 to the HOA, plus interest and penalties. The restitution helped, but it would take years to recover the full amount. Patricia had already spent most of the money, and her assets were limited. The HOA ended up having to increase annual dues slightly to cover the shortfall, but homeowners accepted it as necessary to get the community back on solid financial footing. Throughout the summer, I found myself reflecting on how quickly things had spiraled out of control. What started as a petty dispute over a garage door dent had exposed deep-seated corruption and abuse of power. If Patricia had just left me alone, if she hadn't decided to retaliate so dramatically, she might have gotten away with the embezzlement indefinitely. Mike stopped by one Saturday afternoon in July, pulling up in his truck rather than the bulldozer. We sat on my back deck, drinking beer and watching the sun set. "So was it worth it?" he asked. "All the drama, the meetings, the investigation," I thought about it. "Yeah, I think so. The neighborhood's better now. People feel like they have a voice, and Patricia can't hurt anyone else. Still, 3 a.m. and a bulldozer. That's going to be a tough story to top," I laughed. "I'm fine with never topping it. I've had enough excitement for a while." But even as I said it, I felt grateful for how things had turned out. The snow pile that had seemed like a disaster at 3 in the morning had ultimately led to positive change for the entire community. Sometimes standing up to a bully, even when it seemed easier to just give in, was the right thing to do. Jim hosted a neighborhood barbecue in August, a celebration of the community's recovery. Almost everyone attended, filling his backyard with conversation and laughter. The new HOA board gave brief remarks, thanking everyone for their patience during the transition. Tom presented Mr. Garrison with a plaque recognizing his leadership during the crisis. Then, to my surprise, Tom called me up. "Pete, we wanted to thank you too. If you hadn't stood up to Patricia, if you hadn't been willing to fight back, we might never have uncovered what was really going on. Your garage door dent and that snow pile ended up saving this community a lot of pain." He handed me a gift card to a local restaurant and shook my hand. The crowd applauded, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride. Later, as the party wound down, I stood talking with Carol Vaughn. Her mother had recovered from her stroke and was doing well, no longer facing baseless HOA fines. "I wanted to apologize," Carol said. "When you first started having trouble with Patricia, I remember thinking you should just fix the garage door and move on. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten for everyone." "You don't need to apologize," I told her. "I thought about just fixing it too. It seemed easier than fighting. But sometimes easy isn't right." "Well, I'm glad you fought. My mom was so stressed about those fines while she was trying to recover. It was affecting her health. When they were dismissed, it was like a weight lifted off her." As I drove home that night, I thought about the past 6 months and how much had changed. My garage door dent was fixed now, repaired on a weekend in May when the weather had finally warmed up. The driveway where the snow pile had been was clear and clean. The neighborhood felt lighter somehow, less oppressive. I'd learned something important through all of this. Communities work when people are willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable or risky. Patricia had counted on people being too intimidated or too busy to challenge her. She'd been wrong. The Bulldozer incident became something of a legend in Maple Ridge. Months later, people still brought it up, laughing about the image of Mike rolling down the street at 3 a.m. in a Caterpillar D6. Some people called it the night the neighborhood fought back. Others joked that it was the most dramatic snow removal in Minnesota history. For me, it was a reminder that sometimes the most effective response to an unreasonable situation is decisive action. I'd been trapped, literally blocked from living my life, and I'd found a way to break free. The consequences had been more complex than I'd anticipated, but ultimately positive. In September, I got a call from Detective Rodriguez. Patricia's case was officially closed. She'd entered prison to begin serving her sentence. The detective wanted to thank me one more time for coming forward and providing evidence. "Cases like this are tough because people often don't want to get involved," she said. "They figure it's not their problem, or they're afraid of retaliation. But you and your neighbors showed real courage in speaking up. You probably saved other communities from dealing with similar corruption, because Patricia's case has been used as a training example for investigating HOA fraud." After we hung up, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter was finally complete. Patricia was facing justice, the HOA was on solid ground, and the neighborhood was healing. I went outside to get my mail and saw Tom across the street, waving. He walked over with a big smile. "Board meeting tonight," he said. "Just routine stuff, approving the landscaping contract for fall cleanup, nothing dramatic." "That sounds perfect," I said, and I meant it. The garage door looked good. The driveway was clear. And when winter came again, I had no doubt the snow would be plowed properly, without any mountains of ice blocking anyone's way. Sometimes all it takes to fix a broken system is one person willing to say no, one bulldozer at 3 in the morning, and a community ready to stand together. That's what I'd learned, and it was a lesson I'd carry forward long after the last traces of that notorious snow pile had melted away.